A leather belt cracked against a small back. The girl bit down on her own lip. She would not scream. She had learned not to scream. The buckle bit into her shoulder and her knees gave out, but she caught herself on the woodshed wall. Behind her, a man's boots crunched through the gravel. He was big. Thick arms. A red face from drinking. He raised the belt again. She had been counting since breakfast. 12 strikes. 12 before she had even finished her chores. Across the dirt road, a man on horseback had stopped without a word. He did not move. He did not call out. He simply watched. The girl's name was Elsie. She was 11 years old. What that man on the horse chose to do in the hours that followed would change 2 lives forever and shatter a third entirely. Stay with me on this one. The man on the horse did not move for a long time. His name was Caleb Reeve. He was 46 years old. He had a thick gray beard and a face that did not give much away. He had been riding back from town with a sack of flour, a tin of coffee, and 3 new fishing hooks for spring. The road crossed the bottomland where the Hatcher place sat. He had not planned to stop. He had not planned to look. But his horse had slowed at the sound of the belt, and Caleb had looked because that was the kind of man he was. He sat in the saddle and watched the rest of it happen. He counted 4 more strikes after he stopped. 16 total. The girl never made a sound. That was the part that got him. A child taking 16 blows from a grown man's belt and not making a sound. That was a child who had learned a hard lesson about screaming. When it was over, the father walked back into the house and slammed the door. The girl crawled on her hands and knees to the woodpile and sat with her back against it. She didn't cry. She just sat there breathing. Caleb knew the man inside that house. Everyone in the valley knew Wesley Hatcher. Hatcher had worked the bottomland for 12 years. He had buried a wife who died bringing the girl into the world, and he had been drinking heavy ever since. He owed money at the store. He owed money at the saloon. He had a temper that had cleared more than 1 bar. People said he hit the child. People had said it for years. Nobody had done a thing about it. That included Caleb. He had heard the talk. He had heard it last winter when he came down for sugar and salt. He had heard it again in the spring when he sold a calf at the auction. He had heard the words and he had ridden home because it was not his business and because Caleb Reeve had not made anything his business since the fever took his wife 18 months back. Sarah had been 39. She had died on a Thursday afternoon in their bed, with him holding her hand. The doctor had come too late and had said too little. Caleb had buried her on the ridge behind the cabin under a cedar tree. He had not gone back into town for 6 months. He had not spoken to a living soul for the first 90 days. He had stopped caring about other people's troubles because his own had hollowed him out. But now there was a girl with 16 welts on her back sitting against a woodpile, and Caleb was still there in the road, and his horse was waiting, and the sun was working its way up the sky. He reached into his saddlebag. His hand found the small wooden carving Sarah had made the winter before she died. A sparrow no bigger than a hen's egg. She had whittled it on a quiet evening by the stove and given it to him without saying much. He had carried it ever since. He held it in his palm and looked at it and did not know what he was looking for. He put it back in the bag. Then he turned his horse off the road. He rode up the rutted track to the porch. The dog under the steps growled once and then went quiet. Caleb dismounted, tied the horse to the rail and stepped up onto the boards. He could smell whiskey and something burnt coming from the house. He knocked on the door 3 times, evenly, hard enough to be heard but not hard enough to start a fight. He had no plan. He had no badge. He was not the law and not a relation, and not anyone's idea of a hero. He was a widowed mountain man with a sack of flour and a wooden bird in his saddlebag, and he was about to put himself between a drunk and a child for no reason that he could have written down on a piece of paper. The door opened. Wesley Hatcher stood in the frame. Big man. Bigger than he had looked from the road. His shirt was open at the throat, and his eyes were red, and his belt was still in his hand. "What do you want?" he said. Caleb chose his words slow. "I came about the girl." Hatcher squinted at him. "What about her?" "I'm looking for help up at my place," Caleb said. "I've got a roof to fix and a winter coming. I can't keep up with the cooking and the chores and the work outside both. I thought I'd hire a girl for a few weeks to help in the house." Hatcher laughed. It was an ugly sound. "She ain't for hire. I'd pay you for her time." That changed something behind Hatcher's eyes. Caleb saw it. The man's mind moved slow, but it moved straight when there was money in front of it. "How much?" $2 a day. 1 week to start." Hatcher whistled. $2 was real money. A grown man working timber got $1.25. "You take care of her food," Hatcher said. "Yes." "You bring her back next Saturday." "Yes." Hatcher turned and shouted into the dark of the house. "Elsie, get out here." She came around the corner with her head down. She had pulled her dress straight and tucked her hair behind her ears. The marks on her arms were already turning purple. Her bottom lip was split where she had bit it. She didn't look at Caleb. She didn't look at anyone. "You're going up the mountain with this man for a week," Hatcher said. "You do what he says. You don't sass him. You don't run off. If you cause him any trouble, I'll hear about it, and I'll deal with it when you come home. Understand?" She nodded. Hatcher stuck out his hand. Caleb counted out $14 in silver and laid it across the man's palm. Hatcher closed his fist around the coins and grunted and turned back into the house. The door shut. Caleb and the girl stood on the porch. "Do you have any belongings?" he said quietly. She shook her head no. "Come on then." He lifted her up onto the horse behind him. She weighed almost nothing. Less than the sack of flour. He turned the horse, and they rode away from the house and up the road and toward the high ground. She didn't say a word the whole way. His cabin was 3 hours up the trail. By the time they got there, the sun was past noon. He helped her down. He showed her the cabin. One main room with a stove and a table, and his bed in the corner. A loft up a ladder. A spring out back. "You can sleep in the loft if you want," he said. "Or by the fire. I don't care which." She nodded. He poured water into a cup and gave it to her. She drank it all. He cut a slice of bread and put butter on it and gave it to her. She ate it slow and careful, like it might be taken away. "There's stew in the pot." "I'll heat it." She ate 2 bowls. That night he laid out a blanket by the hearth. She crawled onto it and pulled it up to her chin and watched the door. He sat in his chair across the room, with his rifle leaning against the wall. He didn't sleep until past midnight. When he woke at dawn, she was still watching the door. The first 3 days she barely spoke. She helped him with the kindling. She fed the chickens. She washed the supper dishes. Every time he came near her, she went stiff like a creature that had learned the world was full of fists. On the 4th day she spoke. He had set a cup of milk in front of her, and she said thank you. 2 words. "Quiet." He nodded and didn't make a thing of it. On the 5th day she laughed once. He had let the dog into the cabin, and the dog had knocked over a stool, and she had laughed before she remembered she wasn't supposed to. She covered her mouth and looked at him scared. He smiled at her with his eyes and went back to mending the harness. On the 6th day, He found her crying behind the barn. He didn't ask why. He sat down on the chopping block 10 feet from her and waited until she was done. Then he handed her his handkerchief. She took it and wiped her face and gave it back. "I don't want to go back," she said. He nodded. "I know." That was all either of them said. The 7th day was Saturday. He had told Hatcher he would bring her back that day. Instead, he saddled his horse before dawn and rode down to town alone. He found Sheriff Bell in the office over the feed store. Bell was a tired man in his 60s who had held the job for 20 years. Caleb laid it out plain. The marks on the girl's back. The years of it. The way she had said she didn't want to go home. The sheriff listened. He took off his hat and rubbed his forehead. When Caleb was done, the old man looked at him a long time. "Caleb, I have known you 15 years. I'll tell you the truth. There's no law against a man whipping his own child. Folks don't like it. Folks talk. But the law don't see it that way. Not in this county. Not in any county I know. If she was beat half to death, I could take her. She ain't. She's marked. That ain't enough. What if I keep her?" The sheriff sighed. "Then you're a man who took another man's child. He can come and get her. He can come with a deputy. He can come with a gun. And if you stand in his way, you're the one breaking the law. Not him." Caleb sat with that. "What would you do?" he said. The sheriff put his hat back on. "I do what you came here to do. I just can't help you do it." Caleb rode back up the mountain. When he came in the door, Elsie was standing at the table with a wooden spoon in her hand. She had been stirring something. The cabin smelled like onions and broth. She looked up at him and almost smiled. "I made supper," she said. He took off his hat and hung it on the peg. The wind was up outside, and the dog was asleep by the fire, and the candle was burning low. They ate together. She ate slowly. She didn't flinch when he passed her the salt. After supper, he read by the candlelight, and she sat across from him with the spoon still in her hand, turning it over and over like she could not believe she had been allowed to use it. For the first time in a very long time, she smiled. He didn't tell her what the sheriff had said. She was halfway through her second bowl of stew the next evening when the dog started barking. It was not the lazy bark the dog gave at a deer. It was the deep, fast bark he gave at a man on the road. Caleb stood up before the first knock came. The pounding hit the door like a fist with weight behind it. "Reeve, open this door." It was Hatcher's voice. Slurred. Furious. Caleb crossed the room and put his hand on Elsie's shoulder. She had gone white. He didn't speak. He just pointed her to the loft. She climbed the ladder fast and disappeared into the dark above. He picked up his rifle. He opened the door. Hatcher was on the porch with 2 other men. One was wearing a tin star. The other was a younger version of Hatcher himself. Same red face. Same drinker's belly. The deputy looked at his boots. "Where's my girl, Reeve?" "She's safe. She's mine." "Hand her over." Caleb didn't move. "Deputy," Hatcher said, "this man stole my daughter. I want her back." The deputy cleared his throat. He couldn't have been 30 years old. He had a wife and 2 children of his own, and this job paid him $8 a week. He looked at Caleb like a man asking forgiveness for something he was about to do. "Mr. Reeve, I have to ask, did you take the girl from her father's house?" "He paid me to take her. For a week. The week is up tomorrow. He came a day early." Hatcher snorted. "He took her. Now he's keeping her. I want her in my wagon in the next minute, or there's going to be hell on this mountain." The deputy looked at his boots again. Mr. Reeve, the law says she goes home with her father if he says so. Caleb said, bring her down then. He climbed the ladder himself. He spoke to her low, where the men outside couldn't hear. He told her she didn't have to go back. He told her to come down to the door and tell the deputy what she wanted. He told her the law might not save her, but her own voice might. She came down the ladder. He stood between her and the door. She came around him slowly and stood in the doorframe. She looked at her father once, and then she looked at the deputy. Sir, she said, in a small voice that did not waver, I do not want to go home with that man. He hurts me. Every day. I would rather stay here. The deputy's face changed. Hatcher's didn't. You hush, he said. You hush right now. The deputy held up a hand. Mr. Hatcher. The girl spoke. I don't care if the girl spoke. I'm her father. I am taking her home. Sir, you and I are going to step back to the wagon and have a conversation. Hatcher didn't step back. He came forward. He came up the porch step with the belt buckle in his fist. Caleb met him at the threshold. The buckle came around in a heavy arc, and Caleb caught Hatcher's wrist with his left hand and drove his right fist straight into the man's face. Hatcher went down on the boards. He came up with the buckle still swinging. Caleb hit him again. The man dropped. Caleb stood over him with his knee on his chest. You will not take her tonight. You will not take her any night. You touch this door again, and the next thing you feel is a .45 caliber hole in your chest. Do you understand me? Hatcher said something through his bloody mouth. Do you understand me? He said yes. Caleb led him up. The brother stepped back off the porch with his hands up. The deputy hadn't drawn his pistol. He stood there with his thumbs in his belt looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Mr. Reeve, he said, I am going to have to come back tomorrow. With the judge if necessary. This is not done. I understand. Don't run. Caleb said nothing. The three men got back in the wagon. Hatcher leaned out as they pulled away. This ain't done, Reeve. I got cousins in 3 counties. You think you can keep her up on this rock? You can't. I'll come back with 10 men. I will burn this cabin to the ground with you both in it before I let you keep my girl. The wagon rolled down the track and the dust lifted behind it, and then the sound was gone. Caleb closed the door. He set the bar across it. He stood there for a long minute with his forehead against the wood. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button before we go any further. This story is about to get harder, and I want you here for it. He went to her. She was crying without making a sound. He could hear it because he had learned to hear it. He crouched in front of her and put his hands on her shoulders. Listen to me. We are going to leave tonight. We are going someplace he cannot find us. Do you trust me? She nodded. Good. He went to the chest at the foot of his bed. He pulled out paper and ink and a pen. He sat down at the table and he wrote a letter. He wrote it fast because he had been writing it in his head for 3 days. The letter was to his sister. Her name was Margaret Reeve. She was 48 years old. She lived in a small Tennessee town 200 miles south, where she taught school. He had not spoken to her in 11 years. They had quarreled over their father's house when their father died, and he had said things he should not have said, and she had said things she should not have said, and they had not spoken since. He wrote a letter that started, Margaret, I have done you wrong. I am asking your help anyway. He wrote a single page. He folded it. He sealed it. Then he packed. They left an hour before dawn. He saddled both horses. He loaded the pack mule with blankets, hardtack jerky, a side of bacon, 2 full canteens, the rifle, his pistol, and $40 in coin. He gave Elsie his wife's old wool coat. It was too big for her. She rolled the sleeves twice. He left the cabin standing because there was no time to do anything else. He blew out the candle. He locked the door. He left the dog with a cousin's farmhand 4 miles down the back trail because the dog couldn't keep up. They rode east into the high country. He chose the high pass because Hatcher would expect them to take the low road south. The high pass was harder. It would add 3 days to the trip, but it would buy them distance. Hatcher came back to the cabin at mid-morning. Caleb learned this later. The man brought 4 others and a barrel of kerosene. They found the cabin empty and the dog missing, and the tracks already covered by an early snow. Hatcher set fire to the barn. Then he and his men rode east on the road, asking at every farmhouse for a man with a girl on a black horse. Caleb and Elsie were already 3 valleys away. The first day they rode until midnight. The second day they rode until the horses began to stumble. By the 3rd day they were in a country Caleb had hunted twice and not loved either time. The trees grew thin. The wind grew teeth. That night the snow came. It came hard. It came sideways. It came in the kind of sheets that bury a man if he sits still. Caleb found a hunter's lean-to a mile up the ridge. 3 walls of pine logs and a roof that sagged but held. He got Elsie inside. He got the horses tied to the lee side. He built a small fire in a stone ring and put the blankets on her, and sat with his rifle across his knees. Around 2 in the morning, he heard horses. Not their horses. Other horses. Coming up the slope. He got up slowly. He told Elsie to stay flat. He took the rifle and the pistol both, and he went out into the snow. He moved 50 yards down from the lean-to and got behind a fallen tree. The riders were coming up the draw. He counted 5. He could hear them through the wind because they were arguing. He recognized Hatcher's voice. The man was saying that if they didn't catch him by sunup, he was turning back. Caleb knew he could not outshoot 5 men. But he knew this country and they did not. He raised the rifle and fired 1 shot over the lead rider's head. Then he shouted into the dark, "Wilkins, hold your fire. Tom, take the left flank. Henderson, you and Carter come in from the right side." He named 4 men who did not exist. He named them like a man who had a posse with him. The riders down in the draw stopped. He heard them muttering. He fired again. Off into the trees. "Hatcher," he shouted, "drop your weapons and come up alone. Your men are already covered." The first one of them who runs gets shot in the back. One of the riders bolted. Then another. They went crashing down the slope without looking back. 3 left. He fired again. Another bolted. 2 left. Then Hatcher shouted, "Reeve, come down here. Just you and me." Caleb came out from behind the tree. He walked down the slope into the draw with the rifle in his right hand and the pistol on his hip. Hatcher was on foot. The other man had stayed mounted 20 yards back. Hatcher had a knife. He came at Caleb without warning. Caleb dropped the rifle into the snow and went under the first swing. The blade caught the side of his shoulder and he felt it open. He hit Hatcher in the throat with his fist. The man staggered. Caleb hit him again. They went down into the snow together. It was a hard fight. Hatcher was younger by 10 years and meaner by 20. He got the knife up against Caleb's neck and pressed. Caleb caught the wrist and turned it. They rolled. Caleb's knee came down on Hatcher's elbow, and there was a sound like a dry branch snapping. Hatcher screamed. Caleb took the knife. He stood up. He put his boot on Hatcher's chest and pointed the pistol at the man's face. "Get up." Hatcher couldn't. His arm was hanging wrong. "Then listen. You will not come up any mountain near my sister's town. You will not write a letter. You will not send a man. You will not say her name out loud where another man can hear it. If I see your face on any road in any county where she lives, I will not stop next time. Do you understand?" Hatcher nodded. There was blood in his mouth. "Tell your cousin to take you home." Caleb walked back up the slope. The cousin came down off his horse, lifted Hatcher up across the saddle, and rode back the way they had come. When Caleb walked into the lean-to, his shoulder was bleeding through his coat. Elsie was sitting up with the rifle across her knees. She had been ready to use it. She was 11 years old, and she had been ready to use it. She looked at his shoulder and did not say a word. She got the canteen and a clean cloth, and she cleaned the wound and bound it. Her hands were small and they were shaking, but they did the work. They rode out at first light. 4 days later they came down out of the mountains and into a railroad town. Caleb sold one horse. He bought a ticket on the southbound train. He wrote her name on the ticket in his own handwriting. He wrote Elsie Reeve. He had no right to give her his last name. But Elsie Hatcher was a name that belonged to the man on the mountain. Elsie Reeve was a name that belonged to her future. He gave her the letter for Margaret. He folded $30 into the lining of her coat. He gave her his wife's wooden sparrow because he did not know what else to give. "I will come for you in the spring," he said. "I will come when it is safe. I will write every Sunday until I do." She held his hand. She did not let go until the conductor called all aboard. The train pulled away. She pressed her hand to the window glass. He pressed his hand to the same place from the platform. The train turned a curve in the tracks and was gone. Caleb rode back up the mountain alone. The cabin was still standing. The barn was a black square on the snow. He rebuilt it slow over the winter, cutting timber from the high ridge and dragging it down behind a single horse. The work was hard and he was glad for it. Hard work was a thing a man could put his hands on. Word came down from the next county in early March. A trapper found Wesley Hatcher frozen in a draw 3 miles from the high pass. The man's arm had set wrong and turned bad, and he had ridden out into a storm trying to get to a doctor and had not made it. The trapper said the body was curled up like a child against a fallen pine. The county buried him in a pauper's grave behind the church. Nobody came to the service. Caleb did not feel anything when he heard it. He was not glad. He was not sorry. The man was simply gone, and the world was the same shape it had been the day before, only with one less danger in it. Letters came from Tennessee through the winter. They came every 2 weeks once Margaret got the post road working again after the snow. The first letter said only this: "She is here. She is safe. We are talking. M." The second letter said, "She does not eat enough. She does not sleep through the night. She asks about you every morning." The third letter said, "She read me a passage out of the Bible last evening, slow but without a single mistake. I had not known she could read. She told me you had been teaching her in the loft of your cabin in the evenings. She told me you said a girl who could read could go anywhere. I am writing this with tears in my eyes, Caleb. Whatever has been wrong between us, it is over. Come down here as soon as the roads open." He read that letter twice and put it in the drawer with Sarah's things. Spring came late that year. In April, he sold the cabin to a young couple from the valley who had just married and needed a place to start. He sold most of his cattle. He kept 2 horses. He packed everything he owned into a single wagon. He stopped at the cedar tree on the ridge, and he stood there for a long time without saying anything that needed to be said. Then he rode south. He came into Margaret's town on a Tuesday in May. The road ran past a small white church and a schoolhouse, and a row of houses with porches. He stopped at the third house. There was a woman in the yard with gray hair and his mother's eyes, and a girl of 12 with a clean dress and a ribbon in her hair, sitting on the porch step with a book in her lap. The girl looked up. She saw him. She came off that porch like a deer breaking from cover. She didn't run to him. She crashed into him. Her arms went around his ribs, and she pressed her face into his coat, and she cried in a way she had not let herself cry the whole winter. He held her. His sister stood in the yard and watched and put her hand over her mouth. He stayed. He took a small house at the edge of town. He set up a shop in the back and built wagons and shod horses and mended wheels. The town learned his name slow because he did not say much. But they came to know him. He fixed the schoolhouse roof for free the first autumn. He carved a new pulpit for the church the second. Elsie went to school. She read every book in Margaret's house and every book in the schoolroom, and she asked Caleb for more. He ordered them by mail from Knoxville. She read them by candlelight at his kitchen table on Saturday evenings, while he worked at the bench by the window. She grew up. She became a teacher at 16. She took the small school in the next valley over. She walked there every Monday and walked back every Friday and stayed with Margaret on weekends. She wore her hair tied back. She had a quiet way with the children. The mothers in that valley said she was the gentlest teacher their county had ever seen. When she was 20, she married a country doctor named Thomas Pell. He was a good man. He had asked Caleb's permission first, even though he didn't have to. Caleb had given it without a word. Just a nod and a hand on the young man's shoulder. The wedding was in the small white church. She walked down the aisle on Caleb's arm. He was 60 years old now. His beard was full white. He walked her slow because his right knee had never been the same since the winter of the snow. She held his elbow with both hands like she was afraid she might lose him before they reached the altar. At the altar, he lifted the veil. She kissed his cheek. She whispered, "Thank you." He whispered back, "Live." Then he placed her hand in the doctor's hand, and he stepped back. That night after the wedding supper, he walked home alone. The lamps were lit in the houses along the road. The crickets were loud. He stopped at his shop, and he hung his coat on the peg, and he hung his hat on the peg next to it. On the wall above his bench hung a leather belt. It was old. It was cracked. It was the same kind of belt that had cracked across a small back on a dirt road many years before in another country. He used it now to strop his knives. He had taken it down off a man in the snow, and he had carried it home, and he had given it a different kind of work to do. He stood in front of it for a long time. He had stopped on a dirt road one morning because something in him would not let him ride past. That choice had cost him a winter in the snow, a fight with a knife in the dark, and the only home he had ever known. He would have done it again tomorrow.